When the great shadow first appeared over the city, people thought a giant storm cloud was forming. The sky turned dim even though the sun was still up, and a cold wind moved through the streets. Everyone looked up, confused, and then the noise started deep, slow, like the sky itself was groaning. It wasn't thunder. It wasn't any machine they knew. It was something alive. As the shape came closer, people began to understand what they were looking at. It was a creature, huge and long, like a mountain that had grown wings. The creature's body was covered in thousands, no, millions of strange barnacle-like bumps that looked rough and painful. The sight was so surprising that many froze in place, unable to breathe for a moment. Then the fear hit them all at once. People shouted. Some pointed at the sky. Some ran for shelters or hid behind cars. Traffic stopped in every direction. A few even fell to the ground, shaking from the shock. No one had seen anything like this before. Even with all the alien visitors Earth had met in recent years, nothing compared to this enormous dragon-like creature descending toward the ground. She was clearly an alien. Her wings were wide and shaped like thick crystal. Her long tail dragged behind her as she slowly lowered herself toward an empty field outside the city. Her scales were supposed to be shiny, maybe even beautiful, but the millions of barnacle-like growths covering her made her look sick and frightening. The bumps were uneven, swollen, and gave her the appearance of a creature suffering for a very long time. When she finally landed, the ground shook. Dust rushed up into the air. People watched from a distance, scared to get even one step closer. Some filmed the scene on their phones, speaking nervously into their microphones. Others whispered about her being dangerous, infected, cursed, or even a weapon from another planet. News drones arrived within minutes, hovering high above her. They didn't dare move near her face or wings, staying far enough away to avoid any sudden reaction. Reporters stood behind barriers, speaking loudly into cameras, trying to guess what the creature was and where she came from. But no one knew anything. Everything was guesswork. Authorities came next. Security teams in protective suits surrounded the area. They ordered people to stay inside their homes and closed off the roads leading to the field. They didn't approach the creature either. They stayed far away, holding scanners and long-range devices, studying her from a distance like she was some dangerous explosive. The creature looked weak. She lay there on the ground, breathing heavily, her chest rising and falling with a slow, tired rhythm. Her wings drooped. Her eyes, large, golden, and full of exhaustion, moved slowly across the horizon. She wasn't roaring or attacking. She wasn't even moving much. She just looked tired, hurt, and alone. But because of her appearance, no one wanted to go near her. People didn't see her pain. They only saw her size, her strange shape, and the rough barnacle-like growths covering her entire body. Her presence made them too uncomfortable to think clearly. She was different, so different that they reacted with fear first, questions later. For hours, she remained there without moving. Authorities argued about what to do. Some suggested using loud sound weapons to push her away. Others argued that she might be dangerous if threatened. A few recommended waiting for alien officials to arrive, since she clearly wasn't from Earth. But no one wanted to take responsibility. No one wanted to get close to her. In the middle of all this fear and confusion, there was one person among the crowd who didn't see her the same way. He wasn't part of the military or the emergency teams. He wasn't a scientist or an alien expert. He was just a simple mechanic from the area who happened to be returning home after a long shift. He stood at the back of the crowd, watching the creature carefully. Unlike the others, he didn't look scared. Furious, yes. Worried, yes. But not afraid in the same way everyone else was. There was something in the creature's eyes that caught his attention, a quiet plea, a soft heaviness, as if she was asking for help without making any sound. While everyone stepped back, he stepped forward. People shouted at him to stop. They told him he was crazy, that it was too dangerous, that he could be hurt. But he didn't listen. Something about the creature felt familiar to him, not in shape or appearance, of course, but in the feeling she gave off. He had seen that same defeated look in abandoned animals he had helped in the past. He had seen it in lost pets, in wounded birds, in creatures that came to him because no one else cared to give them a chance not to him. She wasn't a monster. She was someone who needed help. He walked slowly, hands open, showing he meant no harm. The security teams warned him to turn back. They shouted into their megaphones, telling him it was forbidden to approach the creature. But he ignored them, moving calmly across the empty field. Dust crunched beneath his boots, and every step felt heavy because thousands of eyes were watching him in disbelief. The creature moved her eyes toward him as he approached. Her pupils shifted slightly, focusing on the lone human who dared to come near. She didn't raise her head or growl. She didn't flare her wings or show aggression. She simply looked at him, quietly acknowledging him. When he reached a safe but close distance, he stopped. His heart was beating fast, not from fear, but from the weight of the moment. He didn't know if she understood human language, but he spoke to her anyway. He told her he wasn't going to hurt her. He told her he could see she was tired. He told her no one else might want to help, but he did. The creature blinked slowly, as if she understood the tone, if not the exact words. A soft, weak breath escaped her, stirring the dust around her face. It wasn't a threat. It felt like a sigh of relief. The crowd fell silent as they watched this strange, gentle exchange. Even the security teams hesitated, unsure of whether to intervene or let the moment continue. The mechanic noticed the barnacle-like growths up close for the first time. They looked painful, swollen, and tight against her scales. Some were cracked, some seemed infected. It was clear that whatever journey she had taken to reach Earth had been long and difficult. She wasn't here to cause trouble. She was here because she had nowhere else to go. He continued speaking softly, telling her she wasn't alone now. He didn't know how much he could do for her, but he promised he would try anything to help. For the first time since she arrived, the creature made a small movement. Her head tilted slightly, just enough to show she recognized his kindness. Her enormous golden eye softened, the tension loosening just a little. People watching from far away didn't understand what they were seeing. Some recorded the moment with shaking hands. Some whispered to each other, surprised that the creature didn't react violently. Others simply stared, wondering how one ordinary human had become the only person brave enough to approach the alien Empress dragon no one else wanted near. And in that quiet, dusty field, something simple but powerful happened. A connection formed, one built not on fear or science or alien technology, but on compassion. The creature, feared and rejected by everyone else, found one human who saw past her appearance. One human who stepped forward when everyone else stepped back. That single moment would be remembered later as the beginning of a story no one on Earth expected. A story that would show how one person's kindness could reach even the most unexpected places in the universe. The mechanic stood there, only a few steps away from the giant alien dragon everyone else feared. The field was silent, except for the soft wind and the slow, tired breathing of the creature lying on the ground. People behind the safety barriers couldn't believe what they were seeing. Some whispered. Some argued. Some simply watched with wide eyes, waiting to see what would happen next. He felt the weight of all those eyes on his back, but he didn't let it distract him. His focus stayed on the creature in front of him. Her huge golden eye moved slowly, following his every shift. even though she looked frightening to others. To him she looked like someone fighting to stay awake after days of pain. He took another slow step forward. The ground shook lightly under her massive body, but she didn't react aggressively. She didn't try to rise or roar. She just watched him, as if trying to understand why he was the only one who came close. He lifted his hand slightly, not touching her yet, but showing her he meant no harm. His voice was soft as he spoke, not trying to control her or impress anyone watching. He spoke the same way he would speak to a scared animal, calm, gentle, respectful. "You're hurting. I can see that. You don't need to be scared of me." He didn't know if she understood his words, but his tone mattered more. Her pupils softened just a little, a small sign she didn't see him as a threat. Behind him, officers shouted again, through megaphones, ordering him to step back. They warned him that the creature could be unpredictable, dangerous, or carrying unknown infections, but their voices felt distant to him now. He didn't look back. He didn't answer. The creature needed someone to stay, and he refused to walk away simply because everyone else did. The dragon's long neck trembled slightly. Her wings twitched, as if she wanted to stretch them, but didn't have the strength. The barnacle-like growths that covered her looked even worse up close, thick, clumped together, like painful stones glued to her skin. Some were cracked, some were leaking a faint clear fluid, and some were stuck deep between her scales. Seeing her like this stirred something deep inside him. This wasn't a creature arriving to invade Earth. This was someone begging for relief. Someone who had traveled too far, suffered too much, and now lay completely alone on a planet full of strangers. Without touching her, he crouched down so he wasn't towering over her face. He didn't want her to feel trapped or challenged. The creature's large golden eye blinked slowly, following him. Up close, that single eye was the size of a window, bright but full of exhaustion. He spoke again, softer than before. "I won't hurt you. I just want to know what you need." For a moment, nothing happened. The creature simply looked at him, breathing her slow, heavy breaths. But then, almost too gently for her size, she lowered her head a little closer to the ground. It wasn't a threat. It wasn't an attack. It was more like she was showing trust, or asking for help. The crowd gasped when they saw her move. Security teams lifted their weapons, prepared for danger, but the mechanic quickly raised his hand without looking back. "Don't," he said firmly. "She's not attacking. She's just trying to communicate." They didn't listen. They shouted again, telling him to get away. Some officers debated using drones to push him back. Others argued about whether they should sedate the creature. Everyone was making noise, giving orders, arguing over plans, but none of them stepped forward. He was the only one close enough to see the truth. The creature wasn't dangerous right now. She was weak. Her huge breaths were slow, shaky, and painful. Even her wings, which looked like they could crush a building, were lying flat and lifeless on the ground. He took a deep breath and decided to take the risk. Slowly, carefully, he reached out his hand and placed it on the side of her face. Her skin was warm, rough, and trembling under his touch. For a creature so big and powerful, she felt incredibly fragile in that moment. The crowd gasped again, but he ignored them. He kept his hand steady. The creature didn't flinch or pull away. Instead, she let out a very low, very soft hum. So soft it was more like a vibration in the air than a sound. It wasn't threatening. It felt grateful. He had no idea how he understood that, but he did. He kept his hand there for a long moment, letting her know she wasn't alone. Her breathing eased slightly, as if his calm presence helped her relax. Then he noticed something important. The barnacle-like growths near her neck pulsed faintly, almost like they were alive. They tightened against her skin every time she breathed. Some of them seemed to block her movements. The mechanic's face tightened with concern. "These things are hurting you," he whispered. Maybe she didn't know his language, but when he touched one of the growths gently, she reacted. Her huge body flinched, and a sharp hiss escaped her. Not out of anger, but out of pain. He quickly pulled his hand back. "I'm sorry," he said. "I didn't mean to hurt you." The creature slowly relaxed again, her eye meeting his with a tired look. She understood his intention. She knew he wasn't there to cause harm. A drone hovered overhead, recording everything. People watching the live broadcast gasped as they saw a human gently placing his hand on a creature bigger than any earth animal. The entire world was now witnessing this impossible moment. But for him, it wasn't about fame or attention. It was about being there for someone who desperately needed help. He sat down beside her, cross-legged on the dusty ground. The sun was beginning to set behind them, casting long shadows across the field. He spoke softly to her, telling her she wasn't alone, telling her he would try to understand what she needed. And then something unexpected happened. The creature shifted slightly, her huge tail adjusting behind her. With a tired but deliberate motion, she moved one massive wing closer, curling it around just a little, not enough to trap him, but enough to show she accepted him. In her own way, she was letting him stay close. It was her way of saying, "You're safe. I trust you." No alien translator was needed. The meaning was clear. People watching from far behind the barrier were stunned. Some were scared, thinking the creature might crush him. But when she settled her wing gently beside him, they realized it wasn't aggression. It was something else entirely, something they didn't expect from a creature that looked so intimidating. The mechanic placed his hand on her again, slower this time. She didn't flinch. She didn't tremble. She simply breathed, her bodies, tension softening little by little. He understood then that she had been alone for a long, long time before arriving here. As he sat there, he thought about what it must have taken for her to reach Earth. A creature of her size wouldn't travel across galaxies unless she had no other choice. Something terrible must have happened to her, something that left her weak, injured, and covered in painful growths. And yet, despite her suffering, she still showed trust to the first person who cared. The mechanic felt a strong sense of responsibility rise in his chest. He didn't know how, but he knew he had to help her. He couldn't walk away now, not when she had finally found the courage to let someone near. The sky darkened slowly. Emergency lights glowed from vehicles behind the barriers. Officers whispered to each other, unsure of what to do next. No one dared to approach. No one had the courage to get close. Only one human stayed by her side. He didn't know it yet, but this small act, choosing to sit beside her instead of running away, was the beginning of a bond that would change her fate and his in ways neither of them could imagine. The sun had almost disappeared behind the horizon when the mechanic realized the creature was still breathing heavily, still exhausted, and still covered in the barnacle-like growths that made her look so terrifying to everyone else. He didn't care how many people were watching. He didn't care about the warnings or the fear around him. What mattered was that she was alive, and she needed someone to care. He stayed beside her, moving carefully so he didn't startle her. Every so often, he would speak softly, not expecting an answer, but hoping she would feel safe. "I'm here," he said. "You're not alone." His voice was calm, steady, full of reassurance. The creature lifted her head slightly, turning her massive eye toward him. It wasn't a full look, just a small movement, but it was enough for him to know she recognized him. He smiled softly, though he knew she couldn't see it the way humans did. Still, he thought she could feel his intention. He examined her growths more closely. They weren't just barnacles. They were alive in a way that seemed parasitic. They had attached themselves to her scales over time and caused her visible pain. Some looked cracked and bleeding. Others seemed swollen and infected. It was clear to him that if these weren't removed, her body would only grow weaker. He knew that any attempt to remove them would be dangerous. For a creature so large, one wrong move could injure her further or worse. He didn't have any specialized tools for this. Nothing from Earth had been made to help a being like her. Still, he couldn't walk away. Not now. Not when she had finally trusted someone. He reached out slowly, letting his hand hover just above one of the smaller growths. She flinched slightly at first, but then stopped. She seemed to be testing him, deciding if he would hurt her or help her. He stayed still, patient, waiting for her to understand his intention. Then he touched it very gently. He expected a flinch, maybe even a snap of her massive jaws, but instead she exhaled slowly, almost like a sigh of relief. That small reaction told him she understood that he wasn't there to harm her. He spoke softly again. "I know this hurts. I can help you. I don't know how yet, but I will try." The creature moved slightly, adjusting her wings so she could make space for him. It was the first time she had made room for anyone since she arrived. It was the first sign of trust, and he felt a small surge of hope. People behind the barriers were watching, some in awe, some in disbelief. They whispered to each other about how one human had approached a creature that everyone else avoided. A few cameras continued to roll, capturing the unlikely bond forming before their eyes. But he wasn't thinking about the crowd. He was thinking about her, about how fragile she seemed, despite her enormous size. Night fell fully, and the temperature began to drop. He noticed she shivered slightly. Not from fear, he could see the tension in her muscles, but from cold and exhaustion. He looked around, but there was nothing immediately available to provide warmth. No blankets, no equipment, no shelter designed for a being of her size. So he did the only thing he could. He stayed beside her, using his own presence to offer comfort. He talked quietly about small things, about the wind, about the stars, about the fact that she had finally reached a place where someone cared. He didn't expect her to understand his words. He hoped she understood the tone. He hoped she felt his intention. Hours passed, and he noticed something subtle but important. She began to relax slightly. Her wings rested closer to her body. Her breathing grew steadier. She even tilted her head toward him when he spoke, a tiny gesture that showed she was beginning to trust him. By now, he had realized that simply staying near her, speaking softly, and showing care was the first step. Before any tools, before any physical help, she needed someone to believe she was worth helping. And he had made that choice. He had chosen to believe in her. The first small connection between them gave him courage. He started thinking about how he might remove the barnacles safely. He didn't have alien medical knowledge, but he had tools, creativity, and patience. He knew it would take time, and he knew he couldn't do it alone if the crowd panicked. But at least he could prepare. He could understand her pain and plan carefully for the next steps. He leaned closer, keeping his movements slow and deliberate, so he wouldn't alarm her. He placed both hands on the edge of one wing, testing how she might respond. The barnacles pressed against her scales there, and she twitched slightly. She didn't snap, she didn't roar. She simply shifted and exhaled. He interpreted that as a signal to continue gently. "Just relax," he whispered. "I won't hurt you. I just want to help." Time passed slowly, the two of them silent except for her breathing and the soft sounds of the wind at night. He stayed patient. He didn't rush. He knew she needed to decide for herself whether to trust him fully. He also knew that rushing could undo all the progress he had made. As he observed her, he noticed more subtle details. Her eyes were intelligent, aware and deeply expressive. Even though she was alien, there was a look of sadness in them, as if she had been through great suffering. Her body, despite its size, moved with elegance and grace whenever she made the smallest shift. And beneath the barnacles, he could see flashes of what must be her natural scales gleaming faintly under the moonlight. The more he looked, more he realized that this creature, this Empress dragon, as he began thinking of her, was not a monster. She was a being in pain, a traveler lost in a world that didn't understand her. And he was the first human to see her not as a threat, but as someone who needed help. He continued talking to her softly, telling her stories about simple things, the colors of the night sky, the gentle wind over the city, the small animals he worked with every day. He hoped the familiarity of human life would calm her, would make her feel less alone in a strange world. Then he noticed a small, almost invisible movement. One of the barnacle-like growths at the edge of her wing had loosened slightly under. Her own movement. It gave him hope. If one could move, maybe they could be removed carefully, slowly, over time. He thought about how he could design a safe method. He didn't have all the answers yet, but he had the determination to try. Hours continued to pass. He stayed with her all through the night, never leaving her side. He didn't sleep. He didn't eat. Every moment was spent observing, comforting, and understanding her. And all the while, the crowd slowly began to disperse. People had seen enough. Some were afraid, some were tired, but all of them had witnessed something extraordinary. One human had approached what everyone else feared, and he had been accepted by the first light of dawn. The Empress dragon was showing signs of trust that were impossible to ignore. She lifted her head a little higher than before, and she even let him touch a different part of her body without flinching. The mechanic realized that this was more than just a moment of kindness. This was the start of a bond that could change both their lives. He felt a mixture of awe and responsibility. He understood that caring for her would not be simple. He didn't have medical training for alien species, and he didn't know the full extent of her needs. But he also knew that no one else would try. No one else had the courage, patience, or willingness to see past fear. And he had made the choice to step forward when it mattered. For the first time since she landed on Earth, she rested more comfortably. Her wings were less tense. Her breathing slowed. Her golden eye followed him in a way that seemed almost human in its recognition. She had chosen him. He was the only human who had shown her that kindness, and she was responding with trust. Mechanic took a deep breath. He knew this was just the beginning. There would be challenges, risks, and moments of fear. But he also knew that nothing would stop him from helping her now. He was determined to be the human who stayed, the human who cared, the human who made her feel safe when no one else would. And so, with the first light of morning touching the field, the unlikely bond between the tired, barnacle-covered Empress, dragon, and the human who refused to walk away became unbreakable. Neither fully understood what the future would hold, but both understood that trust had been earned that night, and that trust would guide everything to come. The morning sun spread over the field, casting long shadows across the alien dragon's massive form. The mechanic had stayed all night by her side, watching her breathe, watching her small movements, and learning the rhythm of her exhaustion. Even after hours of observation, one thing became clear. The barnacle-like growths covering her were more than just decoration. They were dangerous. They seemed alive, almost like parasites, clinging tightly to her skin and causing pain with every movement. He studied them carefully. Some were cracked and bleeding. Others were hardened and pressing against her scales, restricting her. He didn't know exactly what they were, but he knew that leaving them alone could make her weaker and sicker. He thought of the countless animals he had helped in his life, the ones humans had abandoned or ignored. Somehow, this creature reminded him of them, only much bigger, much more powerful, and much more misunderstood. He spoke softly to her as he moved closer. "I don't know how to fix you completely yet," he said, "but I will figure it out. I'll find a way to make you better." His voice was calm, steady, and patient. She shifted slightly, letting him know she understood, not with words, but with her presence. He realized that before he could even try to remove anything, he needed to understand how these barnacles worked. They weren't ordinary growths. They pulsed slightly with her heartbeat, and some even seemed to merge with her scales. He could not risk pulling them off blindly. One wrong move could injure her permanently. The mechanic scanned the surrounding area for anything that might help. There were emergency vehicles parked far away, some with scientific equipment, but nothing designed for a being of her size. He sighed but didn't panic. He had tools with him, simple ones, human tools, but enough to start small. He could clean the smaller growths and carefully loosen them without causing harm. For the larger ones, he would need a plan, patience, and possibly even some makeshift equipment. He began with the smallest growths first. Kneeling beside her massive body, he gently pressed at one, testing how she would react. She flinched slightly, but did not move away. Encouraged, he continued, working slowly, carefully, one by one. Every now and then, she shifted slightly to give him better access. It was clear that she trusted him more than anyone else in this strange new world. While he worked, he spoke to her softly, telling her what he was doing. "This might hurt a little, but it will help you feel better," he said. She didn't answer, of course, but he noticed her eye following his hands with something like understanding. He treated her not as a monster, but as a patient, someone in pain who needed care. Hours passed. His hands ached from holding small tools and working at awkward angles, but he didn't stop. Slowly, he began to remove some of the smaller barnacles. They were stuck tightly, but with patience, he pried them off without causing injury. She made a small, low hum as he worked, not a sound of pain, but a sound of relief. He took it as a sign he was doing the right thing. During this time, he learned more about her behavior. She seemed cautious but observant, moving only when necessary. She allowed him to touch her scales near sensitive areas, like her neck and wings, which told him she trusted him completely. This trust, he realized, was her gift to him, and he could not betray it as he worked. He thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had come from far away, traveling across galaxies. She must have faced dangers he couldn't imagine, traveling alone while injured and carrying these painful growths. The world had turned away from her, and yet she had survived long enough to find him. That thought filled him with determination. He could not let this chance slip away. He could not let her suffer when help was possible. He paused for a moment to rest his hands, looking at her enormous golden eye. It seemed to shine with faint appreciation, almost like she was thanking him without words. The simple connection between them strengthened his resolve. He whispered again, "We'll get through this. I won't leave you." Then he noticed something alarming. One of the larger barnacles pulsed irregularly, darker in color, and appeared swollen. It looked infected. He realized that this growth had been causing her pain and weakening her even more than he had imagined. It needed careful attention. Removing it would be risky, but leaving it could be fatal. He took a deep breath, steadying himself. He couldn't make mistakes. One wrong move, and she could be seriously injured. He prepared his tools carefully, testing each motion before making contact. She watched him, her massive head tilted slightly, almost as if she knew he was thinking carefully, almost as if she trusted his judgment completely. Step by step, he worked. He loosened the edges of the barnacle with delicate, precise movements. She flinched slightly when he applied pressure, but did not lash out. Slowly, carefully, he removed the growth. When it finally came free, she exhaled slowly, and he felt her body relax just a little. He had helped her without causing harm. The process was exhausting, but he didn't stop. He moved from one area to another, removing smaller growths and loosening larger ones where possible. Every successful removal brought relief to her body. Every movement he made was careful, deliberate, and patient. He knew that rushing or showing frustration could undo all the trust he had earned. By midday, the sun was high in the sky. His hands were sore, his body tired, but he had made progress. Some of the barnacles were gone. She moved slightly more freely, stretching her wings in small arcs. Her breathing became steadier, less strained. She no longer seemed entirely defeated. He paused to drink water and eat a small snack, watching her all the while. She did not leave his side, did not make any sudden movements, and allowed him to continue. He realized that she had not been this relaxed since she arrived. She had found someone who truly cared, and it had changed everything. While working, he also began to understand her intelligence. She watched him closely, seemed to understand his intentions, and even anticipated some of his movements. It was clear that this creature was not only powerful, but deeply aware, capable of judgment and understanding far beyond what humans often assume about alien life. Despite all the challenges, he felt hope for the first time. The bond they had formed was strong. He had seen that she could trust him, that she could feel his care, and that she could rely on him when no one else would. And in return, she had allowed him to touch her, work on her, and slowly help her. Healed by late afternoon, he had removed a large number of the barnacles, enough to make a visible difference. Her movements were freer, her breathing steadier, and her massive body seemed lighter. The golden eye followed him, a silent acknowledgement of the trust and bond they had formed. He stepped back for a moment to admire the progress. Though the HFY work was far from complete, he had achieved something remarkable. He had reached a creature that everyone else feared and been accepted. He had shown patience, courage, and care, and it had made a difference. He knew there was still more work ahead. The larger growths would require careful planning and perhaps makeshift equipment. He didn't yet know how he would remove them safely. But he also knew something even more important. The creature believed in him now, and that trust would guide every step moving forward. As the sun began to set, he sat beside her once more, exhausted but satisfied. She lay next to him, her massive body relaxed, her breathing even. The field was quiet now, almost peaceful, as if the world had paused to witness this unlikely partnership. He reached out and touched her wing gently, feeling the strength that still remained beneath the damaged areas. "We're getting there," he whispered. "Step by step will make you better." And for the first time since she had arrived on Earth, the Empress dragon allowed herself to rest, knowing that someone human, not a government, not scientists, not fearful crowds, was truly on her side. She had found one human who saw past her terrifying exterior, who understood her pain, and who chose to help. And in that choice, she found hope for the first time in what felt like an eternity. The field had grown quiet, except for the soft sounds of the dragon's breathing and the occasional wind sweeping through the tall grass. The mechanic had spent the entire morning and afternoon carefully removing many of the barnacle-like growths that had caused her so much pain. Slowly, she was beginning to move more freely, her massive wings stretching in ways they hadn't since she arrived on Earth. Her golden eye, once filled with exhaustion and fear, now carried a glimmer of relief and somehow trust. But he knew the work was far from over. There were still many of the larger growths that were stubbornly attached, and they looked infected in places. Removing them would be dangerous, even for someone who understood the creature and had already gained her trust. Any sudden move or mistake could hurt her or make her retreat. He had to be careful. He spent the next few hours observing her closely, studying the patterns of her movements and figuring out how to proceed. He noticed how she shifted her massive tail, how her wings flexed, and even how her breathing changed when he touched certain areas. Each observation gave him ideas on how to help her without causing more pain. Patience was key. He started with the areas that seemed less sensitive, testing his tools carefully. A few small barnacles came off with gentle pressure, and she made soft hums of relief that felt almost like gratitude. Encouraged by these small successes, he continued, inch by inch, slowly loosening the larger growths. He whispered to her all the while, telling her what he was doing, hoping his calm voice would ease her anxiety. At one point, he noticed a particularly large and thick growth near her shoulder. It had burrowed into her scales deeply and looked extremely painful. He took a deep breath and adjusted his position, preparing to tackle it. His hands were steady, his mind focused entirely on the task. He moved slowly, gently pressing and loosening the edges. The dragon flinched slightly at first, a low hiss escaping her throat, but she didn't lash out. She seemed to sense his care and trusted him not to hurt her. Slowly, ever so carefully, he worked on removing it. After what felt like an eternity, the growth finally came free. She exhaled a long, slow breath, and he felt her massive body relax just a little. The mechanic wiped sweat from his forehead and took a moment to rest his hands. He looked at her and smiled softly. "See? You're getting lighter," he said. "We're making progress. I'm not leaving you." She moved her wings slightly closer to him, as if acknowledging his words. As the day went on, he continued his work, removing more growths and cleaning her scales where they were cracked or infected. He improvised tools, using what he could find in his kit and the nearby field to make small clamps and spreaders that could gently pull the barnacles away without hurting her. Every small victory made her move more easily, and her breathing became steadier. He noticed something else as he worked. She had begun to watch him with a level of awareness that was surprising. Her eye followed each motion, and she sometimes shifted slightly, as if anticipating what he might do next. It was clear that she was intelligent, not just physically powerful, but mentally aware of what was happening. Despite the exhaustion, he felt a deep satisfaction. He was the first human to gain her trust, and now he was helping her in ways no one else had attempted. He understood that the bond they had formed was unique. She wasn't just a creature he was helping. She was a being capable of understanding, of feeling, and of responding to kindness. By late afternoon, the majority of the smaller growths had been removed, and some of the larger ones had loosened. She was moving more freely, stretching her wings and tail in ways that showed relief. He took a moment to sit back and watch her, noticing how much lighter and less burdened she seemed. Her massive body, once tense and rigid, now had a subtle fluidity, a sign that she was beginning to heal physically as well as emotionally. He realized that she trusted him not just with her safety, but with her pain. She allowed him to touch the areas that hurt the most, areas that might have provoked fear or aggression in any other situation. That trust was remarkable. It wasn't given lightly. She had chosen him, and he understood the weight of that choice. The sun began to dip toward the horizon, painting the sky with soft shades of orange and pink. He paused again to rest, knowing that tomorrow he would continue with the larger growths. For now, he wanted her to relax, to feel the relief that came from having someone care for her in a world that had rejected her. As he sat beside her, he spoke softly. "You're doing great. I know this has been hard, but you're stronger than anyone gives you credit for. We'll keep going, and we'll make you feel whole again." She tilted her head slightly toward him, a small gesture that seemed almost like understanding. He looked around at the empty field. The crowd from the previous day had long gone, and the city seemed to have returned to normal, oblivious to the incredible bond that had formed here. But he didn't care. The world could watch or ignore. His focus was entirely on her. Night began to fall, and with it came the quiet of the field. Stars began to appear in the sky, tiny pinpoints of light that reflected faintly in her golden eye. She moved closer to him, her enormous body curling slightly, not to intimidate, but to allow him to stay near her. He reached out and touched her wing gently, feeling the strength beneath the damaged areas and the relief from the removed growths. It was a moment of calm, a moment of trust. They didn't need words. He understood her, and she understood him. That understanding, that silent communication, was worth more than anything else in the world. He thought about the journey that had brought her here. She had traveled across galaxies, facing dangers he could hardly imagine. She had been injured, abandoned, and rejected, yet she survived. And now she had found someone human who would not turn away. That thought filled him with determination. He had chosen to stay, to care, and to help. He would not let her down. The night passed slowly, but for the first time since she arrived on Earth, the Empress dragon rested more comfortably. Her breathing was steady, her body relaxed, and her golden eye occasionally blinked with a sense of calm. She had begun to heal, both physically and emotionally, because one human had chosen to believe in her. The mechanic stayed with her until the first light of dawn, refusing to leave. He knew that the work ahead would be difficult, but he also knew that trust had been established. She allowed him near her most vulnerable parts. She allowed him to touch her without fear. That trust was the foundation for everything that would come next. By sunrise, he had a plan. He would continue removing the larger growths carefully over the coming days, using patient and deliberate methods. He would improvise equipment, study her reactions, and ensure she remained safe. Most importantly, he would stay with her. No one else mattered. Only her well-being mattered. As he watched her stretch her wings, flex her tail, and take a deep, steady breath, he felt a deep sense of accomplishment. He had helped her more than anyone else dared to try. He had earned her trust. And in doing so, he had formed a bond that could not easily be broken. The Empress dragon, once feared, abandoned, and rejected, was beginning to feel relief and safety. The world outside might never understand, but here in this quiet field, a remarkable partnership had formed. One human had chosen to care when everyone else turned away. One human had chosen to see beyond fear and appearance. And that choice had begun to change everything. He reached out and touched her golden eye lightly with his fingertips, careful not to startle her. She didn't pull away. She didn't growl or hiss. She simply allowed him to stay. And in that silent acceptance, he felt the magnitude of what had happened. For the first time, he believed that together, they could overcome the pain and fear that had brought her to this world. Together, they could face the unknown. Together, they could heal. And as the morning sun fully rose over the field, the mechanic smiled softly. The work was far from done, but the bond they had formed was strong, unbreakable, and filled with hope. They had begun a journey that would change both their lives forever.